The little black girl stood frozen in the middle of the luxury fashion runway while rich guests laughed openly from both sides of the stage. Cameras flashed non-stop across the ballroom as 16-year-old Amara Johnson stared down at her homemade silver dress slowly ripping apart under the bright lights. One of the judges covered her mouth trying not to laugh, while another whispered something that made the audience burst into louder laughter. And standing near the backstage curtains, a wealthy white designer smirked before saying the words that changed Amara's life forever. This is exactly why people from neighborhoods like hers don't belong in elite fashion. The ballroom exploded with cruel laughter again. Amara felt her chest tighten so hard she could barely breathe. Her hands trembled beside her ripped dress while hundreds of rich guests stared at her like she was entertainment instead of a human being. Some people even recorded videos on their phones. Just 30 seconds earlier, Amara had walked confidently onto the runway believing this night could finally change her family's life. Now she wanted to disappear completely. The annual New York Young Designers Gala was one of the biggest fashion competitions in America. Teen designers from wealthy schools across the country competed every year for scholarships, magazine deals, and contracts worth millions. Most contestants arrived wearing luxury brands, surrounded by stylists and investors. Amara arrived alone, carrying her dress inside a borrowed suitcase because her mother couldn't afford train tickets and hotel rooms at the same time. For months, she secretly designed the silver dress by hand inside their tiny apartment in Chicago while her mother worked overnight cleaning office buildings. Amara used leftover fabric scraps from discount stores, old jewelry pieces from thrift shops, and sewing tools older than she was. Every stitch carried hope, not just for herself, for her mother too, because ever since her father died 3 years earlier, life became survival instead of living. Bills stacked endlessly. Electricity shut off twice during winter. Some nights her mother skipped meals pretending she wasn't hungry so Amara could eat first. Fashion was the only thing keeping Amara emotionally alive. When she designed clothes, the world finally stopped feeling small. But tonight, the world felt crueler than ever. The wealthy white designer mocking her was Victoria Sinclair, one of the most famous fashion icons in New York. She built her reputation judging young artists harshly on television while rich audiences called her brutally honest. Now Victoria stared directly at Amara with cold amusement. "You should have stayed realistic, sweetheart," Victoria continued loudly enough for nearby cameras to hear. "Talent alone doesn't buy class." More laughter spread across the ballroom. Amara felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of them. Not here. Not in front of people already looking down on her. One of the judges finally stood and pointed toward the ripped section near Amara's waistline. "Her stitching is falling apart." Another judge shook his head dramatically. "This competition has standards." Amara looked down at the damaged dress in horror. The fabric wasn't supposed to tear. Something was wrong. Then suddenly she remembered backstage. A tall blonde contestant accidentally bumped into her minutes before the runway started, causing Amara's suitcase to fall open across the floor. At the time, Amara apologized nervously while rushing to fix everything before her turn. Now realization hit her stomach like ice. Someone tampered with the dress. The audience kept laughing while photographers zoomed closer, hoping to capture Amara crying on stage. Online livestream comments exploded with cruelty. "She looks cheap. Why would they invite her? This is embarrassing." Amara slowly clenched her fists. For a moment she thought about running away. Then something unexpected happened. A loud voice suddenly echoed from the back of the ballroom. "Wait!" The entire room turned instantly. Yes. An older black woman wearing glasses pushed aggressively through the crowd while holding a tablet in her hands. Security guards tried stopping her, but she kept moving forward. That girl's dress was sabotage. The ballroom fell silent. Victoria Sinclair rolled her eyes immediately. "And who exactly are you?" The woman walked directly onto the runway beside Amara. "My name is Denise Carter," she said firmly. "Former senior designer for Maison Lumia Paris." Gasps spread across the audience instantly. Even several judges looked shocked now, because Maison Lumia was one of the most respected luxury fashion houses in the world. Denise lifted the torn fabric carefully while cameras zoomed closer. "This material didn't fail naturally," she announced. "The stitching was cut manually with a seam blade." The crowd erupted into confused whispers. Victoria's confident smile disappeared slightly. Denise turned toward the judges, who handled contested garments backstage. Suddenly, one nervous assistant near the curtains looked terrified. Amara stared at Denise in disbelief while her heart pounded violently. She had no idea who this woman was or why she was defending her. But for the first time that night, someone powerful was finally standing beside her. Victoria Sinclair crossed her arms tightly. "Even if that's true, the competition cannot pause every time an amateur falls apart under pressure." Denise slowly looked toward Victoria, then calmly replied, "Funny coming from someone who stole half her early designs from black artists nobody remembers." The ballroom exploded. People literally stood from their seats. Reporters rushed forward while cameras flashed non-stop across the runway. Victoria's face turned pale instantly. "You better be careful," Victoria hissed. Denise didn't move. "No," she replied coldly. "You should." Amara looked between both women, completely stunned, while chaos spread through the gala ballroom. Judges whispered nervously among themselves. Social media live streams exploded as clips of the confrontation spread online within seconds. Then Denise gently turned toward Amara. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Amara. Denise smiled softly for the first time all night. "Well, Amara," she lifted part of the damaged silver dress carefully under the runway lights. "Whoever taught you how to sew understood genius." Amara nearly broke emotionally right there. Nobody had ever called her work genius before, especially not in rooms like this. Denise looked back toward the judges. This girl hand-stitched impossible detailing using bargain fabric and outdated equipment. Most professionals twice her age couldn't do that. Her voice became sharper, and instead of recognizing talent, this room laughed at her because she didn't arrive rich enough. Silence spread slowly through the ballroom, because deep down, everybody knew she was right. Amara stood motionless under the runway lights while the entire ballroom watched Denise Carter confront Victoria Sinclair face to face. The atmosphere had completely changed. Just minutes earlier, people laughed at Amara like she was some poor girl pretending to belong in a rich world. Now whispers spread nervously through the audience as reporters aimed cameras toward Victoria instead. Victoria forced a smile, but tension showed clearly in her eyes. "You're making dramatic accusations based on damaged fabric," she said carefully. Denise didn't blink. "No, I'm making professional observations based on 40 years in fashion." A nervous silence settled across the judges' table. Then Denise pointed directly toward the ripped section of Amara's dress. The seam was sliced from the inside using a precision blade. She looked toward the crowd, which means somebody touched this dress backstage before the runway. All eyes shifted toward the backstage assistants instantly. One young blonde contestant near the curtains suddenly looked pale. Amara recognized her immediately. Her name was Chloe Hastings, the same girl who accidentally knocked over Amara's suitcase earlier. Chloe crossed her arms defensively. "Why are you staring at me?" Denise noticed the reaction instantly. "Interesting," she said calmly. "Nobody mentioned your name." The audience murmured louder. Chloe's wealthy parents sat near the front row, looking uncomfortable while cameras slowly turned toward them too. Her father owned a luxury fashion investment company connected to several judges at the competition. Victoria quickly stepped in again. "This entire scene is becoming ridiculous." But Denise wasn't finished. She reached into Amara's torn dress carefully and pulled out something tiny hidden beneath the fabric, a silver seam blade. The ballroom gasped loudly. Amara covered her mouth in shock. Denise held the blade up for cameras to see clearly. "Now," she said quietly, "it's becoming evidence." Reporters rushed forward aggressively while flashes lit up the runway. Non-stop social media comments exploded across live streams. The dress was sabotage. She was set up. Rich girl exposed live. Victoria Sinclair's face tightened with panic for the first time all night. Meanwhile, Amara stood there barely processing what was happening. Her chest still hurt from humiliation, but now another feeling slowly pushed through the pain. Validation. Because deep down she knew her dress wasn't weak. She spent months sewing every detail by hand until her fingers bled some nights. She skipped sleep before school. She repaired old fabric pieces again and again because buying new material cost too much. That dress carried her entire heart inside it. And somebody tried destroying it before she even had a chance. One judge finally cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should pause the competition temporarily." "No," Denise interrupted immediately. Everyone looked at her. "You already embarrassed this girl publicly," Denise said sharply. "You laughed at her, humiliated her, allowed wealthy guests to mock her existence." She pointed toward Amara. "Now she deserves the same runway everyone else received." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then, unexpectedly, the audience started clapping. At first only a few people, then more. Soon nearly half the ballroom applauded loudly while Amara stood frozen under the lights trying not to cry again. Victoria looked furious, because the room was slipping away from her. Denise turned gently toward Amara. "Can you walk one more time?" Amara looked down at the damaged dress, nervously. "It's ruined." Denise smiled softly. "No, sweetheart." She carefully adjusted part of the torn fabric. "Now it has a story." The words hit Amara deeply. For years she watched rich designers create damaged fashion, worth thousands of dollars, while people from neighborhoods like hers got mocked for wearing repaired clothes out of survival. But suddenly Denise transformed Amara's pain into something powerful, something human. Denise stepped back toward the runway entrance. The ballroom lights dimmed slowly. Soft music began playing again across the massive room while cameras focused completely on Amara. Her breathing shook slightly as she turned toward the runway one more time. Then she started walking, and this time, nobody laughed. The silver dress shimmered beautifully under the lights, despite the damage. In some strange way, the torn section actually made the design feel more emotional, more real, more unforgettable. Every stitch reflected resilience, survival, imperfection refusing to hide itself. People watched silently as Amara walked with tears threatening her eyes but strength growing inside her posture. Denise was right. The dress had a story now, and so did she. By the time Amara reached the end of the runway, several audience members were already standing. Then came louder applause. Then cheering. One fashion blogger near the front whispered emotionally, "That's the most powerful thing tonight." Phones recorded everywhere. Even some judges looked ashamed now. Victoria Sinclair remained seated with crossed arms, but anger burned across her face because attention no longer belonged to her rich contestants. It belonged to the poor black girl they tried humiliating publicly. When Amara returned backstage afterward, her legs nearly collapsed from adrenaline. Denise caught her gently before she could stumble. "You okay?" Amara nodded shakily. "Why are you helping me?" Denise looked at her for a long moment. "Because 30 years ago," she said quietly, "I was you." Amara blinked in surprise. Denise sat beside her near the makeup mirrors while distant crowd noise echoed through backstage hallways. "I came to New York from Detroit with sketches and garbage bags because I couldn't afford portfolios," Denise explained. "People smiled at my face while stealing ideas behind closed doors." Her eyes darkened slightly. Victoria Sinclair built part of her early career copying designs from young black artists nobody protected. Amara stared at her. "She used us," Denise continued softly. "Because powerful people knew talented black designers rarely had lawyers, investors, or rich families defending them." The reality of those words felt heavy, because Amara understood exactly what Denise meant. Tonight wasn't really about one dress. It was about who society believed belonged inside luxury spaces, and who didn't. Suddenly loud arguing erupted near the backstage entrance. Several reporters stormed toward the area, while security struggled to control them. "What happened?" Amara asked nervously. One assistant rushed past whispering excitedly, "Somebody leaked old sketches online." Denise immediately stood up. Within seconds, giant screens around the ballroom switched from runway visuals to social media feeds exploding with side-by-side images. Victoria Sinclair's famous early fashion collections, next to original sketches created years earlier by unknown black designers, including Denise Carter. The similarities looked impossible to deny. The ballroom erupted into chaos again. Guests shouted over each other. Reporters nearly ran across chairs trying to reach Victoria for comments. Livestream numbers exploded into the millions as hashtags spread online worldwide. Hashtag Victoria stole designs. Hashtag Justice for Amara. Hashtag Fashionedness to expose Victoria finally stood screaming at organizers to shut everything down, but nobody listened anymore, because the truth had escaped. Amara watched the giant screens in disbelief while Denise remained strangely calm beside her. "You leaked those," Amara whispered. Denise smiled slightly. "I protected receipts." For the first time all night, Amara actually laughed softly through her tears. Then suddenly someone touched her shoulder carefully. A tall woman wearing an elegant black suit stood behind her with two assistants nearby. "Amara Johnson." Amara nodded nervously. The woman extended her hand. "My name is Eleanor Graves." She smiled warmly. "Creative director for Valence International." Amara's eyes widened instantly. Valence was one of the biggest fashion companies in the world. Eleanor looked directly at Amara's dress again. "I've attended this gala 15 years, she paused, "and I haven't seen raw talent like yours in a very long time." Amara could barely breathe. Eleanor handed her a business card. "We'd like to sponsor your education in Paris." Everything around Amara suddenly felt unreal. Her mother struggling to pay bills, the tiny apartment, the nights sewing alone beside flickering lights, the humiliation earlier tonight. All of it crashed emotionally through her chest at once. "You mean a scholarship?" Amara whispered. Eleanor smiled. "No," she glanced toward the chaotic ballroom behind them. "I mean a career."